Hey everybody, this is Brandon Ford and welcome to another Insomniac edition of the Blind Rage podcast. That's right, I am tossing and turning and turning and tossing and punching my pillow and still unable to drift off into the land of slumber. So I figured I would do something constructive. So for this episode's commentary, I'm going to be doing 2010's Dear Mr. Gacy, starring William Forsythe and Jesse Moss. I'm using the Anchor Bay DVD edition. I'm not sure where you can stream it, but I'm willing to bet it's on Prime. And before we get into the episode, I would like to encourage you to please go to Amazon.com and check out my books in paperback and Kindle editions. I have some new titles up, like You Wore a Leather Jacket, Progressive Entrapment, The Mystery of Kelly Christopher. If you prefer audiobooks, I am on audible.com as well as the Audible app. Just type in Brandon Ford and you'll find I have 10 titles up at the time of this recording. Most recently, The Mystery of Kelly Christopher, Progressive Entrapment. We also have The Final Girl, Plaything, Decayed Etchings, Open Wounds, Coffee at Midnight, all kinds of good stuff. So, yeah, please check that stuff out. And if you don't follow me on Instagram already, please do so. You can find me at writer Brandon Ford. You can also follow me on Twitter at Brandon Ford, even though I don't pay too much attention to my Twitter account these days, although I check it from time to time. I'm also on Letterboxd, posting short little nonsensical reviews for the movies that I enjoy and the movies that I don't enjoy. So if you want to follow me there, I am at Brandon Ford. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, critiques, suggestions, criticisms about the podcast, you can email me directly at blindragepod81@gmail.com. Last but not least, please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe, especially rate and review. Rating only takes a couple of seconds. Just hit the drop down, select a star rating, and submit. You're done. That's all you gotta do. Helps the algorithms of the show, gets me more exposure, and if you enjoy the show, I'm sure you would like to see it reach a broader audience. I know I certainly would. So there's that. And so I think we're going to get started with a 3 count as usual. So if you're watching along, make sure you have your movie. Oh my God, I do this so fucking often. Your movie. Why I don't know how to say movie for some reason while I'm doing the podcast. If you're watching along, please make sure you have your movie queued up and ready to go. Because we're going to begin in 3, 2, 1, play. Unfortunately, this is the second time I've done a commentary for this particular movie. I recorded one a few weeks back, but for some reason it did not save. I have no idea why, but this phenomenon has happened before, and it's always disheartening when it does, because you ramble on for however long, and then you go to try to find the file to review it, and it's not there. Especially for a movie like this, which is 1 hour 45 minutes. So I spoke pretty steadily about it. And not only that, I studied for it. And by studying, I mean that I revisited the novel. Well, it's not a novel, it's a sort of a memoir. It's true crime, I suppose. True crime book called The Last Victim that was written by Jason Moss, who is the lead character of the movie. I have to keep stopping and thinking because the actor who plays him, Jesse Moss, has the same last name, although they are not related. Jesse is a Canadian actor, and Jason Moss grew up. He wasn't born in Las Vegas. I don't remember where he was born. I think he was born in New York State, but he grew up in Las Vegas and went to UNLV. So I revisited his book, which is a fantastic book. If you haven't, I highly recommend it. It goes deeper into detail with regard to Jason's relationships with not only John Wayne Gacy, but what isn't mentioned in the movie, probably because, and I think smartly so, because Gacy had the most profound effect on Jason's life. But Jason also corresponded with Jeffrey Dahmer briefly before he was killed in prison. He corresponded with Charles Manson, the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, and Henry Lee Lucas, who was the movie Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer was based on. So all of this was for, I believe it was for a master's thesis. And while he did have a strong correspondence with Richard Ramirez, he was tied pretty closely to Gacy in the months leading up to Gacy's execution. The movie takes a lot of artistic liberties, and that is one of the main reasons why I wanted to do commentary for this movie, because of the differences between real life and what is on screen. And sometimes in certain situations, what is on screen is vastly different than what actually happened, and sometimes what is on screen didn't happen at all. There is one scene in particular that I will get to, that I will talk about when we get to it, but I don't know where it came from, but it's not in the book, and it was written, I can only imagine, specifically for this movie. But they did take some artistic liberties. They really didn't get into Jason's past. I don't remember if it is seen in the set dressing of Jason's bedroom, but the real Jason was very much an overachiever. He was very much an intellectual. He had to be the best at everything, and he had several obsessions during his short life. And he committed suicide on June 6, 2006, 6606. and I believe he was only in his early 30s. I think he was, or maybe, I think he was 31, if I'm not mistaken. I don't have the information in front of me because this was an impromptu recording, like I said, because I couldn't sleep. But the real Jason had to be the best at everything he did. He had to go as far as he could go and accomplish everything he could in whatever endeavor he took on. Whether it was school, karate lessons, kickboxing, he participated in a lot of different activities. And once he felt he'd mastered them, he would move on to other things, which I think is kind of a left brain, but well, I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to better yourself, but when it's an obsession and when you feel you have to be the best all the time, it's quite unhealthy. And he told the story in the book about when he was a kid. He was in, I think, 3rd or 4th grade, and his teacher would give, I think they were demerits, I don't know. It's one of those bullshit things where when you're in school, your teacher will say this will end up on your permanent record, and I still don't know what that means. I don't think anybody does. I think it's just something that teachers say to try to scare the shit out of you, but everybody just rolls their eyes. But yeah, it was I believe the equivalent of a demerit. It was a point that was taken. I think it was actually a little more serious than that, actually, because it was a point that could take down your GPA. And it was for lateness, not turning in homework, failing assignments, not participating in class, things like that. And Jason, again, he was on top of everything all the time and strove not to get any of these points. And after a parent-teacher conference, I don't remember whose idea it was. I think it might have been his teacher's idea, but to give him a point on something, and he was shattered, according to his book. I believe it did take down his GPA slightly because it caused him to get a B in that class instead of an A, and he was so used to seeing straight A's. And his teacher didn't necessarily want to set him up for failure, but wanted him to know that you couldn't be perfect all the time. And while I think it was a learning experience and an effective one, I don't think it was necessarily fair. I don't know. I wouldn't be too happy if I worked my ass off and I had a teacher who wanted to do something that would lower my GPA just to prove a point. But anyway, yeah, we're with the family here, and we're talking about, or we were talking about Jason's brother, whose real name is Jared. His name is Jared in the book. They changed it to Alex in the movie. I don't know why they did that, but the same thing with Jason's girlfriend at the time, who was her real name was Jennifer, and in the movie she's Alyssa. This is the first, the worst. This is the first letter he wrote to Gacy, and I believe they took it straight out of the book. A lot there are a lot of things that are said in the movie that, well, let me just say this. There's very little as far as dialogue that is taken out of the book, but a lot of the letters are either they're verbatim or they are very close to it. So I believe that is the most authentic part of the film adaptation. Like I said, they did take some artistic liberties, and some of it was for the better, as in made for better entertainment. Some of it, I don't know, I have trouble accepting because I know what really happened, and it kind of feels like a cheat to me. And it's kind of like the screenwriter spinning a tale just to make things seem more lively than they actually were. Like, for example, it's seen in the movie that Jason's brother, again, his real name is Jared, and his name in the movie is Alex, was being bullied at school. And the story that is told in the book is Jason was tired of seeing his brother getting beaten up by this older kid who was bigger and stronger and could fight better than Jared. And he said to Jared, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you to this kid's house right now, and you're going to fight one-on-one, just you and him. And Jared, of course, said, he'll kill me. And Jason said, no, I will be right there. If he tries anything, I will break it up. I will intervene. But I will make sure that it is a fair fight. He's not going to pull a knife on you. He's not going to pull a chain on you, because I think the impetus of this was he wrapped a dog chain around Jared's neck and was dragging him. I think that was the final straw. So Jason took Jared over to this kid's house, and they fought, and the kid won. But according to Jason, Jared put up a pretty decent fight, and I don't understand this this I don't understand how this could happen, but because Jared was willing to fight this kid, and because he was willing to step up to one of the toughest kids in school, he himself became one of the toughest kids in school after the fact. And I don't think anybody messed with him anymore. And I don't think he had any trouble with that particular bully anymore. But as it's shown in the movie, in one of the scenes that already passed, Jason picked up, in the movie, again, his name is Alex. He picks up Alex from school, and Alex has a black eye. And this bully is continuously making life very difficult for Alex. And Jason arrives to pick Alex up at one moment when the bully was in Alex's face and was threatening him, and Jason gets out of the car and beats his shit out of this kid. And I can understand why they did it this way, because they wanted something that was going on during his correspondence with Gacy, but in all actuality, this happened beforehand. So, because of the kinds of letters he was getting, not just from Gacy, but from Manson and Ramirez and Lucas and Dahmer, no, he didn't get all these letters from all these people, so scratch that. He is so steeped in Gacy's world, as is shown in the movie, that he's coming unglued. He can't see the difference between what's real and what's not anymore. And I believe that he got a little too deep into the heads of some of these people. And it was a nightmare that he couldn't escape. He was in therapy for several years after. And he even said later that if he knew how things were going to transpire, he never would have written that first letter. So that to me says, he said that in an interview when the book was first published in 1999. So that to me says that Gacy and all of these other killers and villains, that he was too close. He was too close and he was too deep. And especially with, I think the person he was second closest to was Richard Ramirez, who was a Satanist, an occultist, and Jason wrote him letters pretending to be a dedicated follower and a Satanist, and he said that he had his own group that he led, and it was kind of like a cult type situation in which, again, he was the leader of, and most of the people in the cult, the participants, according to what Jason wrote to Richard Ramirez, were female. And of course, Richard wanted to see pictures of some of these girls, and it just so happened that Jason knew somebody in the photography department at his school. He had a friend who was a photographer, and he asked for some pictures, some model type shots of this guy's friends. So, he said he sent Ramirez several pictures of the same girl and other girls and said, this is so-and-so, and gave her a whole biography and said, she's like one of my most devoted followers, and she'll do whatever I say, and we engage in this kind of sexual act and that kind of sexual act and blah, blah, blah. And Ramirez was very, very, very into it. So, here he has his brother taking shirtless pictures of him to send to Gacy, who he is certain is gay. And I think he was for sure closeted. He did have, although he insisted he was bisexual, he was attracted to both men and women. However, during the last 2 years of his life, or I guess before he got caught, he hadn't had sex with his wife. It was all sexual assaults with young men. And yeah, and that's another thing too. Gacy, because I always took umbrage with the title that was given him by either the press or by the author of, I believe, the most comprehensive book about his life and his murders, which was The Killer Clown. The author is escaping me, of course, but when I hear Killer Clown, I think of someone dressed as a clown and committing murders. And that was not the case. Gacy dressed up as a clown for picnics, I believe, birthday parties, things like that, for jobs. He didn't have a clown type fetish. He didn't engage in any of the deviant acts that he did while dressed as a clown. So that always kind of annoyed me, that he was known as the Killer Clown. But because he was known as the Killer Clown and he had that book written about him, and he did have a lot of experience as a clown, I believe his clown name was Pogo. He did a lot of paintings of clowns. I believe himself we have some more correspondence. And again, I believe these are taken straight out of the book. But yeah, he painted a lot. He did a lot of painting of clowns, and they sold for a lot of money. And I think he's in the thousands, like $10,000. And I think he sent Jason 3 or 4 paintings. I believe 2 of them were sent directly to Jason. He sent another one to Jared, who he was trying to befriend. And he gave Jason another painting when Jason went to see him in prison. So I believe he had 4 paintings. I don't know where they are now, but I think they're probably with his widow, because he was married at the time. And yeah, and that's another thing too that I think convinces me that he was too close to his subjects, and his subjects got too deep inside his head, because he did work for the FBI. He was a profiler for a while. He was going after killers, and I think he worked for the CIA as well. And then he left and started his own law practice. So, and that's what he was doing at the time of his suicide. So I think he couldn't handle it anymore. He was too, again, I keep saying this, but it's true. He was too close to it, and he couldn't. He speaks in the book about being haunted by Gacy after the fact, and he even says it in an interview that you can find on YouTube. I believe it's for 2020. And he had nightmares about Gacy, one of which involved Gacy coming toward him with blood-soaked hands, and he had nightmares involving, or sometimes he just hear Gacy calling his name. So it was really for an experience that lasted, I think it was 8 months, 8 or 9 months total, I think. And all that time, a lot of things happened, and none of them good. And this is another thing here that I believe was written specifically for the movie, because it's not in the book, and it involves Jason. I think there's only 2 scenes, and he goes to the home of one of Gacy's surviving victims, or I think his only surviving victim. I'm not even sure if this guy was real, because I don't know the Gacy case that well, to be perfectly honest. I know some of what went on, but I can't say that I am an expert on the subject. But in the movie, they wrote this survivor character who Jason wants to interview for his paper that he's writing for school. And this guy has no interest in reliving what happened and the kinds of attacks that he survived at the hands of Gacy. And I believe he goes back a second time in the movie, and the guy actually talks to him. And from what is shown, I believe they just took pieces of things that were documented things that Gacy did to other people that were documented, and they just kind of gobbled it together and made it this guy's story. Because you see some of what Gacy did to him, supposedly did to this guy in flashback, and a lot of it is what is known that he did. So now we have Gacy's first collect call from prison. So yeah, he did call Jason, I believe on Sunday mornings, and I think it got, over time, it went from once a week to twice a week. I think it was Sundays, and then Sundays and Thursdays. And he would call collect, and he would send Jason a check for the calls. And yeah, so there's that. And he did reveal a lot more on the phone than he did in his letters. And although it's only briefly touched upon in the movie, but Gacy very much wanted Jason to have a sexual relationship with his younger brother. He encouraged it. He told him exactly how to coax Jared into it. And it became sort of an obsession for Gacy. He would ask him about it constantly, and he began to fixate on Jared, and he wanted Jared to write him letters too, and Jared was not into it. And what Jason did initially was he wrote a letter, and Jared copied it over in his own handwriting, and then he wrote to Gacy as Jared, and he said that Jared, in Jared's voice, I'm learning how to type, and Jason's letting me use his computer or some bullshit like that. So he used different fonts for his letters and for Jared's letters, but they were all written by Jason. And in the book, during one of the phone calls, he asks Jason to get Jared, or to call for Jared and bring him into, I don't think this was in the movie, I mean in the book, but this is where Jason is telling Gacy that he's considered being a gay hustler. But yeah, I want to get to the scene, but I want to finish the story real quick. There's a scene in the book where they're on the phone, and he wants Jason to get Jared into his bedroom, and I think by the way it's described and the way it's written and what was said, he wanted them to perform sex acts on each other while Gacy listened. Okay, so this, I really don't like this scene because they fucked with it way too much, and I really don't like this actor who's playing the hustler, because I think he fucked with his lines, because what he says doesn't make sense. When Jason approaches him, the first thing he says in a very effeminate, flamboyant voice is, "Well, look what the cat dragged in." And Jason is kind of thrown, and then the hustler says, "What's your name, kitty cat?" Which makes no fucking sense, because he said, "Look what the cat dragged in," meaning that he's calling Jason the dead bird or mouse or whatever that a cat brought into the house, and then he's saying, "What's your name, kitty cat?" saying that Jason is the cat. It makes no sense. But what is authentic is the story that the hustler tells, or the stories that the hustler tells Jason, when Jason is taking notes, because the whole point of this was for Jason because Jason was heterosexual. He didn't know anything about the gay scene. He certainly didn't know anything about gay hustling, so he wanted to speak to a gay hustler to hear what it was like and to know what to say, so that his letters to John could be more, or sound more authentic. So what he did was he found a guy named Luis in the back of a magazine, and he contacted him, and he said, "I'll pay you $20 for a half hour of your time. I just want to know what it's like on the streets, and if you have any stories to share, blah, blah, blah." So he met this guy, Luis, at a bowling alley. They talked for a little while, and that was it. And Jason got what he needed, and that's it. But in the movie, they tried to make it, I guess they tried to make it more interesting. And a lot of what the hustler says I think except for, I think some of this stuff he's improvising. But yeah, a lot of it is taken from the book, including when the story that this guy's about to tell right now, where a John that he picked up and he put a knife to his throat. That really happened, and he did cut him. He didn't kill him, clearly, but what happened in reality was, after he ejaculated into the hustler's mouth, he told him to kneel in front of him, the hustler to kneel in front of the John, and the John urinated into the hustler's mouth. That's not described in the movie. Now, what's about to happen is we come to find that the hustler spiked Jason's drink with something. I don't know. And what happened, I don't know. I think he stole Jason's wallet. I don't know if anything else happened because you don't really see it, or they don't really tell you. But whatever the case, in the movie, the guy fucks with him. And none of that is accurate. That was just added to make the movie a little bit more interesting, I think. So yeah, the like I said, the conversation with the hustler took place in a bowling alley, a quiet space in a bowling alley. This, in the movie, it took place in a bar, a gay bar with a lot of thumping techno music in the background, and there was no alcohol involved. I don't think Jason drank alcohol in real life. Also, shit, I lost my train of thought.
You didn't show up to class. You haven't missed class since third grade.
Yeah, it was just for a month, Tyler.
Shit. I don't know, come back to me. But anyway, so yeah, I think he did tell, or Jason did tell Gacy about his girlfriend, because every conversation over the phone was about sex. And if the letters weren't outwardly sexual, there was a lot of sexual innuendo, and there were a lot of references to sex throughout. And there were passages in which he described, Gacy that is, described his penis in detail. And yeah, the first conversation, I believe, and I think it's in the movie, when they first talk, the first time Gacy calls collect, he wakes Jason up because there's a time difference, because I believe Gacy was in Illinois in a correctional facility, on death row rather, and Jason was in Las Vegas, and I think it's a 3-hour time difference, 2 or 3 hours. And he woke Jason up, and the first thing that Gacy says is, "Were you out all night banging your girlfriend?" or something to that effect.
That pussy motherfucker. You want me to have him taken care of? What do you mean? I know a lot of people out there, and they'll find this cocksucker. And they'll cut his dick off. I'm very protective of the people that I'm close to.
No, John, don't worry about it.
Why aren't you more careful about who you picked up? I told you, you gotta learn to read people. You gotta figure them out before they...
Some of the more interesting things I think they did leave out of the movie.
I watch people very closely when they don't know I'm watching them. I try to figure out where they're going, what they're thinking, what's really going on.
I'm not saying that I don't like the movie because of the way it differs from the book. I think the movie is really well done and very well acted. And much to my surprise, it never had a theatrical. It's a very well made film, but because it was a Canadian production and it premiered on Canadian TV and then it went straight to video in the United States, I believe in December of 2010. So it didn't even have a limited theatrical. I don't even think it played film festivals or conventions or anything like that.
Well, John, thank God I've got you to talk to about these things. I'm learning from the best.
Yeah, Jason does not really say...
Now it's your turn to teach me.
Jason does not really reveal much about himself at all in the letters that he writes to Gacy. He paints himself as Gacy's perfect victim. He knew exactly what kind of guys that Gacy targeted, and so he portrayed himself to be that person. And he also portrayed himself to be sexually confused, which Gacy got off on because he was trying to lead him, of course, into a homosexual realm and encouraged him to have gay sex, and again encouraged him to have sex with his brother. And he also kind of instructed Jason how to masturbate, or told him how he wanted Jason to masturbate. He was quite fond of writing about a technique which Gacy called, I believe he called it head over head. And that is when a male masturbates with his legs propped over his head to masturbate and ejaculate on his own face. And Gacy really wanted Jason to do this, to try it, and he wouldn't stop until Jason admitted, or no, Jason told him that he tried it. He told Gacy, for the most part, everything he wanted to hear, because when he did that, he would get more out of Gacy. And he was able to get more out of Gacy than a lot of the FBI or the federal agents working on the Gacy case were able to get in their investigations. So Jason was very, very smart, and he knew how to manipulate people. Thankfully, he didn't do it nefariously. He did it as part of his research, but he was good at what he did. And when he was working for law enforcement, I don't know that much about it, but I believe that he was very good at his job. And like I said, he did kill himself on 6606. And I don't believe he left a note. I don't think anybody knew why, at least not for sure. But there is some speculation that his choosing that date had something to do with the satanic things that he discussed with Richard Ramirez. And the professor who...
Dear John, I'm so fucking pissed off right now. My father beat my ass again last night.
Yeah, this is another thing. Gacy was physically abused by his father. His father beat him up a lot and humiliated him. And so Jason acted as though he was in the same situation. That he didn't get along with his family, that his father was abusive, and there was no peace, really, in Jason's life. He wanted Gacy to think and to believe that Gacy was all Jason had. And Gacy did. He did believe that. And what I was saying before was completely out of my head now, of course. The professor. The professor who he first presented the idea to in the, I believe it was a forensics class. And yeah, he befriended this guy, and they worked together on the book, and he wrote the introduction and the afterword. And he said that he spoke... I don't remember if it was in the book. I think it was on the Wikipedia page. But he said that he did speak to Jason, because Jason went through a pretty bad depression after the fact. He struggled with depression for years. And the professor said that he spoke to him the day before Jason killed himself, and he said he sounded like he was in good spirits. He sounded happy. So this came as quite a shock when it happened. And I think there's a possibility and a probability that Jason was in high spirits and was happy because he knew exactly what he was going to do the following day, and that he was going to be rid of all of this forever, finally.
How did you lure them into your house? What was your method?
You can get anyone to do anything you want. If you play on their fear, the feeling of energy you get from someone's fear is unlike anything you could ever imagine.
Tell me about that.
All this negative bullshit. What I want to talk about is that sticky letter your brother Alex sent me. I thought you told him that I wanted more detail.
I did.
Yeah, he's talking about how he wanted more details in Jared's / Alex's letters. And Jason, I don't believe, included the letters, any of the letters that
Well, he hasn't been in the best moods lately. John, he keeps getting his ass kicked
The fuck is he getting his ass kicked for? Was he some kind of a pussy?
No,
that Jason wrote for him in the book.
The other kids a lot bigger than him.
Oh, fuck that. You need to jump in there, then.
Jason, you need to be a fucking man. You get a 2x4 and you crack this cocksucker's head open if you have to.
Yeah, so Gacy is encouraging Jason to intervene with the bullying, and it, like I said, I think a lot of it had to do with Jason coming apart with all of this correspondence with Gacy, but it also probably had something to do. Well, no, that's not what happened. But I also think that they wanted you to believe that he attacked this kid because Gacy encouraged him to. Whether or not he encouraged him to do that, I don't know. I don't remember. No, he didn't. Because, like I said, this all happened before he started talking with Gacy. And now he's talking about how to seduce his brother, which is really, really twisted. And you can see on Jesse Moss's face, the actor who plays Jason, you could see how unnerved he is by this. And there you go. He disconnects. And a lot of the time, he said in the book that a lot of the time when they were on the phone, what Gacy said would be so out there and so disturbing. And a lot of it was repetitive. He stayed focused on the same subjects. And number one was sex. And so what he would do was he would watch TV with the volume on low, or he would flip through a magazine because he needed a distraction. However, there are a lot of, and he did take notes, but there are some extensive quotes from Gacy in the book, things that he said over the phone. But Jason said that he didn't set up a method of recording the conversations until after visiting Gacy in prison. So I don't know if he was writing really quickly and was able to jot all this stuff down while Gacy was on the phone. I don't know.
All right, that's it, people. Don't forget the due date of your term papers coming up, and I'm expecting nothing short of brilliance. Goodbye. Jason, can I see you for a minute?
He's about to lash out on the professor, I think, here in this scene.
So what's up? Missing class, and you are in class.
I don't think Jason missed class.
Maybe you got involved with something.
You're not my father, okay? I get enough of this shit from my parents. You're gonna get your precious term paper, but in the meantime, just get off my back about it.
Yeah, he's lashing out at people, and in the movie he lashes out at his mother, at his teacher, at his girlfriend, and I think this is to further show that how deeply Gacy has gotten to him and how troubled Jason is by it. However, he doesn't really talk, if that was true or not, he doesn't really talk about it in the book. he doesn't really say that he had trouble with
I've been calling you for days.
I'm busy, John. Okay, I have a life, you know.
What'd you do? You find someone else?
What are you talking about?
Writing to another inmate?
John, it's not like that, okay?
he never said that he had trouble with keeping,
Don't play both ends against the middle with me, you little shit. I won't tolerate it.
Hey, John.
with controlling himself in front of other people, and again lashing out at those closest to him. He doesn't talk about that. Whether he did, I don't know, but I don't think so. And this was another thing that Gacy was famous for, making threats. So now, because Jason missed a few of his phone calls, you know, Gacy says, "Don't forget who I am." That was another thing that he was fond of, making people think that he was more influential and powerful than he actually was, and knew more people than he actually did, and could have anyone at any time do his bidding for him. And I don't think it's in the book, but in the movie he says that, you know, I could have somebody sitting outside your house
Scare me, huh? You think you scare me?
right now.
Oh, I got you, you fuck. FBI! On the fucking ground!
I think he bought a gun. I don't know. I can't see the TV, but if that's the case, I don't know.
I asked you to watch the car before we left for grass. I'm not going to go. What do you mean you're not going? It means I'm not going. Look, I have a lot of important things on my plate right now. I can't be worried about going to Grandma's house. Oh, really? Yeah. Well, then maybe your father and I should stop worrying about paying the bills around here, and you can start fending for yourself. Yeah, maybe you should.
While it's interesting because his mother in real life was very, very much into true crime. She read true crime books by the stack. And all right, here's the part where Jason's gonna beat up the bully. One of Jason's favorite pastimes was going to the library with his mother, and his mother would show him all the books that she was picking or checking out, and show him pictures that were in there and say, "Look at what this guy did, and look at what this guy did." And so, but even still, she was not, his mother that is, she was not happy with the fact that Jason was corresponding with all of these killers. And so Jason had to make sure that he was able to get home early enough to intercept the mail before his parents did. And if he was unable to, then he had Jared do it. And
what else is new? Where
Yeah.
have you guys been? You know I wanted to leave before it gets too dark.
You're held up. Why does he get to stay?
Because your brother's going through some teenage life crisis. Go get your bag. Let's go.
Sure, let's just worry about Psycho Jason.
Go get your bag. Go!
the phone never fucking stops.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
And that's all because, you know, that's really all Gacy had in his cell, he had his paints. I don't know if he was much of a reader. He wasn't very well educated. According to Jason, a lot of his letters were filled with spelling and grammatical errors. So he had his paints, he had his paintings, he had his TV, he had a little TV in his room, he had a phone in his room, and in his cell, rather. And a lot of that had to do with Gacy's ability to sweet talk the guards. He befriended a lot of the guards, being on death row for, I think, 14 or 15 years. And he was able to pay them to get what he wanted, because he did have money coming in for those god-awful paintings that people bought simply because they were by him, but they weren't good. So he was able to pay the guards to do favors for him.
What are you doing here?
What are you doing with the gun?
And even with, this thing with the gun, this was another thing that was added for the movie.
Yeah, we got it to protect ourselves. Hey, do you want to come in for a second? I mean, as long as you're here.
There's some sexual aggression that comes into play too in the movie with he and Alyssa. And then there's a scene later where he picks up a prostitute and he's very aggressive with her, and you're led to believe that he's going to hurt her, that he's going to sexually assault her, and he ends up leaving the room before anything happens. And again, all of this was written for the movie.
They're gonna kill me in 6 fucking days.
Yeah, so that's all Gacy did was do appeals.
They're gonna kill me in 6 days.
Okay, John, slow down.
That
Alyssa!
Who the fuck is Alyssa?
Jason, forget it. I'm done, okay?
You say you didn't have a girlfriend.
Doesn't matter, John.
I thought you were my friend. I thought I could trust you.
Wait a second, John.
You were a cocksucking piece of shit.
John!
So yeah, he's supposedly being executed in 6 days, and this is where we're getting close to the scene where Jason goes to the prison or death row to visit and spend some time with Gacy one-on-one. And understandably, Jason was very nervous about it, and so he said to Gacy on one of their phone calls, "I would like to speak with the warden first, because I want to know exactly what to expect, where I'll be, where you'll be, blah, blah, blah." And so he got a call from the warden, and the warden said, "You will not be in the same room. You will be behind. You'll be separated by a thick sheet of bulletproof glass. You won't be able to touch each other. You'll be communicating through a phone. Everything that you see in movies." And it turned out that was not the warden. That was another guard that Gacy paid off to make that phone call. And Jason didn't find that out until later. But that was, again, part and parcel with Gacy's character. He was able to get people to do things, anything for the most part, for him. He had a way with people. And that's what everybody says. He had a way with people. He was able to sweet talk people. He was a pathological liar. He had excuses for everything, you know. This is the scene with the prostitute. This scene, I think, could have easily been cut, and I don't think it would have hurt the movie at all. I don't think it belongs, because, again, it didn't happen, and it was only included to show that Jason was slipping deeper into this void, and that corresponding with Gacy was really, really getting to him. But it wasn't getting to him to the point where he was violent toward other people, or he had violent tendencies. But that's the direction that they wanted to go in with the movie. I don't know why, but and before the movie, or I'm sorry, before Jason committed suicide, I believe that I believe that Jason was in talks with the book being adapted in 2005, give or take, and then he killed himself in 2006, and the producers wanted to wait a respectable amount of time because they still wanted to continue with the project. So they wanted to wait what they thought was a respectable amount of time. So they waited until 2009, I guess. Or was it 2000? I don't know when this was shot. I think because it came out toward the end of the year, it was shot sometime in 2010. So yeah, here we go. So now what they did in the movie was they made it seem like this was Jason's last chance to meet Gacy ever, because he was getting executed in a matter of days. But that wasn't true. I think he was getting executed 2 or 3 months, and I'm not sure if he's going back to this victim, to the supposed former victim of Gacy. I don't remember if this was before or after the visit, but the penitentiary that Gacy was being held in was in a very small town in Illinois. I believe it was Chester. And Gacy actually wanted Jason to move there so that he could visit him regularly. He really wanted Jason to be his little fuck toy. So I want to make sure that I get everything out regarding the visit, because it does not happen exactly the way it happens in the movie. a lot of it is factual or true to the book, but a lot of it is also exaggerated. And I think one of the most important things about the visit was toward the end of the visit, the first day that Jason gets there, there is a very violent confrontation between Jason and Gacy, and Gacy exposes himself, begins to masturbate, says that, and it is in the movie when he says, "Do you know how many young guys died for this dick," or whatever. And
Shut your mouth, you pathetic little Hey, relax. You're really gonna enjoy this. I got this specially picked out for you.
that was intense. That came across as very real. So yeah, on that first day, well, let me just say this first of all. And a lot of this had to be edited out. I understand, for timing, they couldn't, because the movie would have been longer than it already is. But what Gacy promised Jason was that he was going to be picked up at the airport by Gacy's lawyer, and he was going to be brought to the motel. See, I believe in the movie they really do. They make you believe that he really was speaking to the warden. But yeah, so Gacy says you're going to be meeting up with my lawyer. He's going to take you to the motel. He's going to take you to and from the arms and leg shackle. And see, what doesn't make sense though in the movie, if they wanted to make it so that he really was speaking to the warden, why was nothing as was promised to Jason? But yeah, so Gacy had this guy who was not his lawyer. He showed up at the airport. He was overweight. He was wearing sweatpants. He was disheveled. He looked like he's just woken up. And Jason came to find later that this guy was, I believe, Gacy's nephew, who was his gopher. He did everything Gacy wanted because he just liked being a part of Gacy's world. And he liked telling people that I did this for Gacy, I did that for Gacy, I saw Gacy today, I'm visiting Gacy tomorrow, things like that. It made him feel like a celebrity or a pseudo-celebrity. And it was never confirmed, but Jason, by the way things played out, Jason assumed that Gacy told this guy that he could have his way with Jason if he so desired. And this became clear to Jason when they got to the motel and he discovered that they were going to be sharing a room. And Jason said, no, I need my own room. Which is completely understandable, because I wouldn't want to be sharing a motel room with somebody I did not know at all. And So yeah, he got his own room, and the guy ended up being harmless. Nothing happened, and so now we have the big visit here, and for the most part, things play out the way they did in the book. There are some differences. One of them that always stood out to me, because I read the book several years ago for the first time, and one thing that always stuck out for me was the food. I think it was roast beef, and Gacy said, it's the best meal on the menu. I special ordered it for you. And according to Jason, the meat was green and very, very tough and inedible. However, Gacy had no qualms about scarfing it down, and he did eat everything that Jason couldn't finish. And so a pop or a chocolate milk. What the fuck is that? I didn't like that line. That was dumb. So, they have their talk here, and there is this folder that Gacy has with all of his files in it, with all of his appeals, all of the legal documents, or all of the correspondence with his attorneys. And that was something that Jason really wanted to peruse because he wanted all of this information. And Gacy knew that, and he kind of hung it over his head, so to speak. Here he is. I don't think he got letters from porn stars, which is what he says in the movie. I don't think he got letters from movie stars or rock stars either. And so it does get very violent toward the end of the visit, and Gacy does try to sexually assault Jason, but Jason doesn't really fight back. Although he is trained in kickboxing and karate and is very much able to fight, interestingly enough, Gacy was so manipulative that he was able to manipulate Jason into believing that he really was the person he proclaimed to be. Scared, meek, unable to fight, unable to protect himself, vulnerable. And vulnerability is something that Gacy prided himself on. And when the time came for Jason to fight back, he couldn't, because he, like I said, he believed who he was, who he said he was in all those letters. And he was frightened. And I believe there was a bit of a struggle. I believe Jason started crying and begging John not to hurt him, and John did ridicule him a bit. And then the guards came, and before Jason left, he asked one of the guards to take their picture, and you see the picture at the end of the movie. And you also see footage of the real Jason talking, and I believe it's from the 2020 interview. But the thing is, Jason was so obsessive about wanting to know everything and getting all of this information that investigators were unable to. He went back twice after the first visit. He went back 3 times total. It was supposed to be 4. He was supposed to be there for, I think, 4 or 5 days, and he was supposed to visit Gacy 4 times. He visited him 3, and he called him to say, I'm not going to be able to come back for the 4th visit because he made it sound like his father controlled his life, that he lorded everything over him, and he couldn't do anything without his father's blessing. So he said, my father wants me to come back. I'm sorry, I can't come. And but again, he did get those 3 visits, and they were long visits. I think they were about 5 hours, 4 or 5 hours each, give or take. This was a true story about, I think it was the first person who Gacy killed, supposedly, and it's written about in the book. He picks this guy up, and they had supposedly consensual sex. And the next morning, this guy was making breakfast for the 2 of them, and I guess he went into the bedroom to wake him up and say it's ready, but it just so happened that he was holding a knife, I guess because he was cooking or, doing whatever. And Gacy says that he saw the knife and he felt threatened, so he killed this guy who was much, much younger than he was. And he claims it was all self-defense. What really happened, we'll never know. But there was also things like he gave Jason, like I said, he gave him a painting. He gave him a bracelet during the visit. And at the end of the first day, right before things calmed down. See, because that was the thing, too, with Gacy, was he could change on a dime. He could go from being very menacing and sadistic, and he could be shouting, get on your knees and do this and that. And then he would be somebody else. He would be nice. He'd be friendly, even. And yeah, this is taken directly out of the book. He's saying, it could take the guards 1 or 2 minutes to come here if you screamed. And he talks about jamming a pen into Jason's throat and saying you could bleed out before anybody came here. Anyway, yeah, so he gave him a bracelet, he gave him a painting, and he also gave Jason a pair of bikini underwear, and he said, I want you to wear these underwear tomorrow when you come back. And when he did go back the next day, Gacy asked if he was wearing the underwear, and Jason said no, he said yes, even though he wasn't. And some of the guards were asked, if they were really monitoring exactly what was going on in this visiting room, and they claimed yes. They said they would never, ever, ever allow Gacy to be in a room with somebody and not be under constant surveillance. But that wasn't true because Jason saw the camera in the room and it was pointed toward the wall. Yeah, and yeah, it didn't happen like that. Their parting was amicable, even though John did have moments where things got explosive. But like I said, John could turn on a dime and he'd be one person 1 minute and a totally different person another. And so I also want to talk about what really happened during the last conversation, because it doesn't exactly happen the way it does here. And that is, in the movie, Gacy calls him and makes all these threats and says, I'm going to show these letters to the police, to the FBI, tell them that you've been molesting your brother, and all of your deviant sexual proclivities. I have proof of all this. I'll destroy you, blah, blah, blah. What happens actually is, like I said, in the book, Jason says that after the visit on death row to Gacy, he was so disturbed by it that he bought a caller ID at an answering machine because he really wanted to sever all ties with Gacy because he was so freaked out. And so what happened was Gacy started getting his little lackey, that nephew or whoever the guy was, to conference call. So I don't know, and Jason doesn't know exactly what happened, but something went wrong where I guess the nephew didn't disconnect the call, and the answering machine recorded everything that the two of them said over the phone. And Gacy said, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. He basically said what he says here, that he's going to show the letters to this person and that person, and I'm going to get him in so much trouble, and I'm going to blackmail him, and blah, blah, blah. And Jason had it all on tape. And after he got enough evidence to feel safe, he picked up the phone and he basically said what he says here, which is, I've already sent copies of the letters that I sent to you to the FBI, which wasn't true, but he was bluffing. But he said, I sent letters to the FBI, copies of the letters to the FBI. My professor knows that all of this was an experiment. I was studying you. And he told them exactly what he did. He said that nothing that I said about myself was true. I portrayed myself to be who you wanted me to be. You never really knew me at all. And I don't think Gacy said a thing, because he was so completely flabbergasted by all of this. He wasn't expecting it. And I think there was one, or no, I don't think there was even a letter. I think that in the several weeks during the lead up to the execution, Gacy did speak to his nephew, who I guess in turn spoke to Jason after Gacy's execution. And Gacy spoke of Jason regularly. Most of the time it was with disdain. And he said, I can't believe you were able to get over me the way you did. Nobody was able to play me like that, or whatever. And I guess he saw Jason as this his biggest failure, and his biggest, the most he was manipulated by anyone ever. Nobody was able to get to him the way Jason did, because Jason knew exactly what he was doing. He was highly intelligent beyond his years. Yeah, and see, they had to exaggerate fucking everything in this movie. That's what annoyed me about it. What really happened was Gacy died by lethal injection, and he was supposed to die after 9 minutes, but he didn't. The injections didn't take effect until 9 minutes later. So it took him 18 minutes to die. In the television broadcast that they just showed, which was supposed to be outside of death row, where Gacy had been executed, they said that something went wrong, and after 3 hours he was finally dead.
Listen, obviously you've been talking to a lot of people about this.
Yeah, so
a lot of buzz on campus about the project. I know some of the other.
He did a lot of talks. He told his story to many audiences, students at his university, high school students, I believe all over the country. And I think this was supposed to be a form of therapy for Jason, but sadly it didn't work, because he couldn't exercise that demon. Gacy was with him until Jason's dying day, and he was a demon that Jason could never escape. Like I said, because while he did get into the heads of some of the other inmates, Gacy was the one he was closest to, and that's why the whole movie is centered around him. But I don't know. I don't think it would have been too bad if they just mentioned that he was reaching out to others. and stayed focused on Gacy. I don't know. But I do recommend the book, especially if you enjoyed the movie, because the book, there's a lot more to this story than what's in this movie. And I think it is a story worth checking out because it's really, really interesting. Yeah, that's exactly what he said. Jason really took me for a ride. He said that to the cousin or the nephew or whatever. I believe he really took me for a ride.
Thousands of people wanted me, but I picked you. We had a real connection, the two of us. And now that I know the truth, I know more than ever that you and I are a lot more alike than you think. It's time to die now. See you on the other side, buddy.
There's another thing too. He was always calling Jason buddy. We're about to see the real Jason in a second. First you see the picture, I think. There he is.
This lonely boy, I had no friends. I wanted someone to teach me or help me. I presented myself as very naive. I didn't want to just learn about Gacy. I wanted to actually talk to him, find out about his crimes, find out the things that no one else could find out about. I thought, I'm going to find the secrets that the FBI can figure out. I'm going to do what the psychologist failed to do. And every letter I got back, I thought that was one step closer to finding out why Gacy buried those kids. But he was also a part of my life for 7 months.
7 months, there you go.
The subject of all my nightmares, but it's weird to know that he's gone.
It's weird to know that he's gone. Those are some very unusual words. It's weird to know that he's gone. To say that really shows the hold that Gacy had on him. Well, that was Dear Mr. Gacy. And my second commentary, let's hope this one actually recorded, unlike the first, which sucked. So I want to say thanks to everybody who stayed with me to the bitter end. And until next time, this is Brandon Ford wishing you all unpleasant dreams.